One.
Hello, and welcome to April's Open Conversation with Transform Network. And we are here today to talk about collective action for social transformation. So we have a really great panel tonight, and we are going to be discussing something that may be new to some of you. It may be something you've been involved in for a long time, but we are just really hoping that you'll join and that you'll share the link and that you'll share this with your friends, because this is going to be something that you want to pay attention to. My name is Mickey Scott Bay Jones, and I am the Director of Training and Program Development with Transform Network. And we are also joined tonight by Scott Bostic with Transform Network, who is helping us with the technical issues. He'll be also communicating with those who are online with us on YouTube. So if you have a question or a comment that you want to share with the panel, you can direct that towards Scott on YouTube, and he'll help you out with that. And I'm going to introduce our panel in a second here, but I do want to just say a little bit about Transform Network if anybody has not joined one of our open conversations before. And what we do is we mobilize activists and missional practitioners for social transformation. And basically what we believe is simple: love God, love your neighbor, and take collective action. And you can find us online at transformnetwork.org. And basically our open conversations are a time that are free, fun, informative, where we talk about challenging, spiritually minded conversations on faith and justice issues. And you can check out past conversations at our website, transformnetwork.org, under the Action tab. And we host one a month, and I'll be announcing next month's conversation at the end. So stay tuned through our whole conversation here, so you can hear what that is. We also have a Twitter handle, of course, and that's at TRANS4, the number 4, M. And we use the hashtag TFOpenConvo. So if you want to hashtag that as you listen, and tweet out all the lovely tweetable gems that these lovely ladies will be sharing, we invite you to do that. All right, so we're going to jump right in, because I think we have a lot to discuss this time. And tonight we have with us Alexia Salvatierra, Judy Esper, Jennifer Bailey, and Holly Roach. And so they are going to introduce themselves and tell you a little bit about who they are and what they do. We'll start with Alexia.
Oh, okay. So I am a Lutheran pastor, although I often describe myself as Luther Costal, which is not a disease. It's Lutheran theologically and Pentecostal spiritually. And I have been engaged in organizing, bringing people together for systemic change in one form or another, locally, nationally, internationally, for 35 years. I have an amazing daughter who is 21 years old, Alina Ortiz Salvatierra, and she is carrying on the family tradition, building on the roots into the future. So I always like to include that as part of who I am, that I have this wonderful daughter.
Yay.
I think that's enough. The only other thing I would say is that what I do at this point in my life is something called faith-rooted organizing, that I teach and train in an approach to organizing that calls people to draw as deeply as possible from the wells of our faith. So we organize as if God is real and Jesus is risen, and with all of the implications that creates for the work.
Yeah, that's just a little small addendum there. That's like, that's like super important.
So we have a book called Faith Rooted Organizing through University Press, and we also have a very loose, wonderful Faith Rooted Organizing on Network, which I can also be glad to share about, that Holly Roach has been helping me with.
Yes, and a website where they can find out more.
And a website, yes, faithrootedorganizing.net, that too.
Yay, good.
Yay.
Thank you so much. Yes, we're going to want to hear more about all of that. And I love hearing from another proud mama, because my daughter is only 14, almost 15, but she is already becoming quite the little activist. So it's nice to see that blossom and bloom and be passed on.
We're talking about collective action. We have these collective selves that go back into the past and forward into the future. So
That's beautiful. Thank you, Alexia. So that's Alexia Salvatierra, everyone, and we'll go on to Holly Roach. Holly.
Hello, thank you. Gosh, okay, well, I am the new board president for Transform Network, who's just gone from being a loose entity to being an incorporated 501c3. So we're happy about that. I'm excited to be in this role to continue to help move this work forward. And I produce the annual gathering that's happening next weekend in Washington, D.C., called the Transform Network Gathering on Urban Transformation. And I also am lucky to be mentored by and get to work with Alexia on faith-rooted organizing. Very happy about that. My background is in broader social justice movements. I hadn't really applied activism to my faith or faith to my activism until about 4 years ago, when I decided that I could be a Christian again, when I discovered progressive Christianity that was activated for justice. So I am really happy to put those two things together, and I like to consider myself a contemplativist, a contemplative activist. I am in Richard Rohr's Living School for Action and Contemplation, have been deeply impacted by the lineage of mystics and who were activists in their own right throughout the ages. So really just loving bringing together personal healing with collective action for collective healing. So that's a lot of what I do. I do some other things too. I do some communications work and always organizing something. Love to do big events, and hope we'll see you guys out at Wild Goose Festival this year in Hot Springs, North Carolina. So I'll pass.
Yay. So yes, Holly does all the things. All the things. And as she talks about learning from Alexia, she has also taught me so much, and we are sisters in the fight together, and it's just a beautiful thing. A beautiful thing. All right, so next we will go on to Jennifer Bailey, and she can introduce herself and talk about all the things that she does.
All the things. Hi, everybody. My name is Reverend Jennifer Bailey. The way I've increasingly been introducing myself is as a minister of the gospel of Jesus Christ, first and foremost. I come from a long lineage of folks in the historically Black church tradition. I was recently ordained an elder in the AME Church, the African Methodist Episcopal Church, which is the oldest historically Black denomination in the U.S., and is a denomination that was founded out of a social movement against racial injustice in Philadelphia in the 18th century. When I'm not preaching and spreading the good news of the word in a church setting, I am also the founder of a new network called the Faith Matters Network. We are a multi-faith organization doing work in the southern United States around faith-rooted organizing and both equipping and empowering existing movements and people who are coming from a space of faith inspiration through both story work and activism. So that's just a little bit about me, and excited to join the conversation today.
Yay, and I have to brag on Jennifer a little bit because she gave, you'll have to explain maybe exactly what it was, but did a prayer at the end of the Selma gathering, 50th anniversary, and she held it down, y'all. Like, she's up there with all these, people that have all these names and titles, and everybody, Jesse Jackson, somebody, I don't know, and I was like, and she just dropped that prayer on y'all, like, bam. It was fantastic. So I was like, that's my prayer. I was so proud. Oh, thank you so much, Jennifer.
Yeah.
All right, so, and next we have Judy Esper. Did I say that right? Esper. Oh, you're muted.
Okay.
There we
go. Yeah, Judy Esper. So yeah, I'm a union organizer with Unite Here, Local 274 in Philadelphia, and we're the Union for Food Service Casino Hotel Workers across the country and in Canada, across the United States and Canada. And I work in the food service division, so I am the organizer for the stadiums in Philadelphia. There's 3 big stadiums where the Phillies, the Sixers, the Flyers play, the Eagles. So it's about 1,500 workers that I work with, from everyone from people make the hot dogs to people sell the the beer vendors to the servers, to the cooks, to the dishwashers, bartenders. And then I just organized a restaurant at the airport called Local Tavern, which is one first union contract, and then Sky Chefs workers that make food for the airplanes at the airport here. And I started out as a interfaith organizer with Clue, working with Alexia, when I was 19, and so I moved from that to student organizing to worker organizing, and I'm also a part of a church in Philadelphia called Circle of Hope. I'm about to become a member soon. That's I believe connected to the Mennonite Central Committee, but it's a evangelical-based church here in Philadelphia. That's me.
Yay.
Yay! Okay, so Holly's gonna brag on Julie a little bit, but yeah, Judy. Sorry, I said Julie. But I think we have a Circle of Hope connection. Joshua, that's my buddy from the Nates program. So you're with me.
Oh.
Love it. Okay,
Joshua,
so
that's awesome.
And they've had Alexia in to train them too. So
Awesome.
it's like all kinds of Circle of Hope connection. It's like a circle of hope.
One of my first times going, I had been there a couple of times, but I hadn't committed to the church, and then Joshua actually reached out to me and said, there's this person coming to speak that I think you really like, Reverend Alexis Sabatino, and I was like, oh my God! And that after that, I started going more regularly to the church.
oh, that's awesome.
Yeah, it's really so fun. I just have to say, it's so fun knowing that, Judy, that you're there. I love that news. I love that news.
It's the first time I've been going regularly to church in like 6 years, but it's really been very healing for me.
Yay.
Awesome. So Holly, tell us more about Judy.
I could brag on everybody extensively. I'm actually really restraining myself right now. But I just have to brag on Judy because this is Judy's, I think, first time being with us in any kind of official capacity as Transform. And so I just want to give her an enormous welcome and just say, what an incredible organizer you are, and what an amazing resource you are to us, both in your faith and how your work is informed by your faith. And I had the great fortune to just randomly kind of meet Judy at the Center for the Working Poor in Los Angeles with our board member, Rebecca Burnt lives there, and we were hanging out with her. And Judy and I got to do a day-long retreat with the contemplative mystic and trauma therapist James Finley, and just got to have this like really beautiful day of journeying through the interior castles of Teresa de Avila, and just having this like really beautiful, we had this beautiful meditation on the beach afterwards. And at any rate, I just had to say that. I just think I'm so excited you're with us. So thank you.
Thank you. I appreciate it. That means a lot to me.
Yay! Oh, we just have such a great panel tonight. This is going to be great. Now, Scott, do you want to introduce yourself? He's just sitting there.
Hi, I'm Scott Bostic. I am a missional fellow and master's divinity student at Wesley Theological Seminary, which is hosting the Transforms National Gathering on Urban Transformation next weekend. Woohoo, hope to see you there. And I connected with several of these fine ladies a couple of years ago by happenstance on one of the first open conversations, and have been progressively getting more and more addicted to the work that they're doing. Yeah, I am on the ordination track and a candidate for ordination in the United Methodist Church, so cousins to the AME Church.
Wesleyan family, what?
Yeah, one beautiful big Methodist family, and so I am I will also give a shout out to my future work site. I'll be starting working this summer at Asbury United Methodist Church, which is a historically black church on the corner of 11th and K in Northwest Washington, D.C. They have been worshiping on that corner since 1836 continuously, and they were part of the breakaway from an all-white or a predominantly white congregation in the Methodist Episcopal Church back in those days. So I'm excited to be here working with you all. I probably won't say too much else. I'll just manage the conversation, but it's a blessing to know you all and meet you all and be a part of what you all are doing.
Yay! Our technical guru. Woo! Okay. All right, so let's get started with some questions that I'll throw out, and then hopefully we have some people over on YouTube who, at any point, you're welcome to throw out some questions, something we talk about, jog something for you. Please feel free to get us your questions, your comments, or ask for someone to expound on what they're saying, and we'll try and get that into the conversation. So I would like to start really basic, because again, there may be some people who are at the beginning of this journey of understanding collective action. So what do you mean, whether it's your personal definition that you've come to over your years of this kind of work, or whether it's some kind of textbook definition that you've adopted, are there some nuances in it? But what do you mean when you say the term collective action? So if you could start us off, Alexia, how would you define that?
Yeah, I was really feeling like the abuela, I'm the grandma of the group. So I'm honored to accept that role, but I think that does mean kicking some things off. Thank you. I was thinking of collective action in two ways. The first way I was thinking of collective action was as a very passionate form of communication. That it's essentially communication. It's communication to the it's communication from the collective to the collective. It's communication from a group of people to the larger society, and particularly to the leaders, the public decision makers that we want to impact. And when I think of it as passionate communication, I think about doing family therapy over the years as a pastoral counselor. When you're doing family therapy, one of the things that you tell people is that you really have to be very conscious about how passionate your communication is, because whose feelings are going to have priority in a given decision. Hopefully everybody's feelings are met, are honored by every decision. But there's going to be some decisions where somebody's feelings have a little more priority, where you're not going to be able to have a perfect balance that satisfies everyone, is that when you ask for your feelings to have priority, don't always ask for your feelings to have priority. Ask for your feelings to have priority related to the degree of your passion. And that's honorable. It's honorable in a family to say, this is something that I'm really passionate about. This is a place where I want my feelings to be heard and where I'm going to express them with as much power as I possibly can. I feel like when we think of the family that is the body politic, or when I think of God's family, that I think that collective action is a moment when a portion of the family or a part of the body is expressing what they feel and perceive with great passion. And hopefully is discerning that it's worthy of that passion, that this is a moment when their feelings and their perspectives need to be responded to and adopted by the whole. So that's part of how I see collective action. The other way that I see collective action is that it's really a time when people take their individual power and they unite it into a common stream. So that's the other part of the definition of collective action, that everybody has power and everybody has different kinds of powers, spiritual power, social power, and that when a group of people unite their power together, that's a moment of collective action. So that's how I see it. I don't know if there's a more textbook definition for it, but that's how I would see it.
No, I love that you put it into the context of a family, of us, kind of being in this together. That's a really beautiful way to look at it, and I've never heard anybody say it that way. Thank you for that. That's really beautiful. Judy, I would love to get your take on this.
Yeah, I think when I recruit workers to be leaders in the union, I have a lot of workers come to me every day with a problem, and they say, I went and I talked to my boss, and they didn't solve the problem. Nothing happened. And so I always tell them, like, we have to work together. We have to work as a group, because when one person goes to their manager and says, like this thing happened, I didn't get the cart that I needed to do my job, and the worker and the manager. When there's so many problems that happen in a workplace, it's easy for problems to just be put to the wayside. But then when a group of 5 workers goes to the manager, people notice. And they say, oh, wow, what's going on? There are 5 people here, bringing this problem. And people get taken more seriously than when it's an individual, when it's a group. And it's the same thing in a community when, one person says, the water went out in my neighborhood, versus 10 people saying, hey, the water went out in our neighborhood. Something needs to happen. People listen when people gather together. I just think of it takes, people are taken more seriously when they're working together as a group than when they're working as an individual. So I guess I don't know if that's helpful.
Yeah. So you're talking about the power that accumulates when people actually come together for a specific idea or specific need.
Yeah.
Perfect. All right. Jennifer, how would you talk about collective action or define it?
Yeah. First, thanks to everybody who's gone, because now my brain is turning and my wheels are turning. So I think the word that came to mind when I heard the phrase collective action was remembering, both in terms of literally remembering, so putting something back together again, right? Putting the members of the body back together again. And I think there's something really powerful in our collective action that is an active memory, right? Calling forth truths that otherwise aren't getting called forth in different spaces. So when we do a direct action, right, we're remembering both physically, bringing back together people who otherwise wouldn't be together, but also carrying with us the stories of our collective and shared experiences of inequality and oppression. So that's the word that came to mind when I heard the phrase. So collective action as memory and as remembering.
Wow, yeah, that's fantastic. That it actually kind of reminds me of what Alexia said about taking from the past and also going into the future, and I guess also being present. So it's this continuum. It's not just, and that reminds me of kind of the native concept of 7 generations, right? So this collective action, even if we're doing a specific collective action, that's not just for ourselves. We also are doing this for the generations to come and to honor the generations that came before. It really is a concept that takes us outside of ourselves. So it's not just about ourselves, it's about our community, and it's about the past and the future, which just takes me right to Holly, because I know Holly definitely comes into it with this contemplative piece and mystic piece, and she really gets some of these deeper spiritual elements of collective action. So could you give us, Holly, your definition of collective action?
Sure. I'm obsessed with collective action, so you guys are just going to have to shut me up at some point. I could talk all night, literally. Yeah, the first thing that I was going to say about collective action is that we're in a very individualistic society. And so collectivity is not something that this culture necessarily encourages in us. So this is, in spiral dynamics, integral theory, they would call this third tier thinking. First tier is egocentric, where I'm just thinking about myself. The second tier is thinking about the people I love around me. The third tier is really thinking about the world and having compassion in our hearts for the experiences of people and the planet. that we don't even know, that we may not never even see. And it's really, I think collective action should be based in that third tier thinking of it's not just about me and my immediate surrounding, kind of the in my backyard mentality, that we're opening our hearts as activists to the world and letting the world in. And the contemplative frame on that is that we really have to let in the pain to be able to accept the oppression that's going on into the world in order to then be able to transform it. So that would be the contemplative framing. What the mystics would say is that we can't, do is what are maybe the way our brains are wired to kind of avoid pain or run from pain or divert ourselves from pain, but actually really fully let it in so that we can accept it and love it and transform it. And so the second thing I would say about collective action is around agency. Mickey, you were with us when we met with Liz Butler in DC, and she's one of our keynotes for the gathering next weekend. And she's with the Movement Strategy Center and had been working on the Walmart workers campaign for 17 years, and that they finally just got the minimum wage raised, the minimum wage raised. And she talks about how people need to realize their agency, their ability to impact their conditions that they live under, and the laws and the systems that abide the conditions of their existence. And I would say that collective action then is about realizing our collective agency, that our collaborative agency, that if we bring our not just our own individual action or our community's action, but to actually link the micro with the macro, really link the personal with the political, then we see that we find common cause with so many other kinds of folks out there who are dealing with a lot of the same issues. And that was really one of the big takeaways from the Occupy movement, was we are the 99%, that even the millionaires are closer to us in experience and economic value to the system that we live in than the billionaires, the 1% that are really controlling the systems that dictate the terms of everyone else's life. So I think about those things. I think the mystical stuff can be a real jump, but I think that we can talk about it in terms of just really being able to not turn away from oppression that's going on in the world, but to be present to it and to bring our attention to it. You're muted, Mickey.
Unmute. Okay. Thank you, Holly. That was fantastic. If you're like me, and as you're hearing each of these brilliant, educated, experienced speakers speak, and you're just, I already want more. I'm like, okay, can you each have 30 minutes to talk? They are all going to be at our Transform Network gathering in DC next weekend. So figure out how to get there because you want to be in a room with these people and many more. But just who we have here tonight in this discussion, it's worth getting there any way you can. So let's go to Judy. You had a thought piggybacking off of something Holly was saying.
Yeah, well, when Holly brought up how we in our society are trained to be more individualistic and to not work together as a community, I think that really struck a chord with me. And what made me think of it, we're also, I think, trained in our society to avoid conflict. And the one thing, actually, at church this Sunday, one of the members spoke about conflict and about how community conflict is very important. Like, if we're really invested in our relationships with each other, we're going to have those conflicts with each other because it's worth working through the struggles. And so I think, and it talks about, she preached about how, when there is an issue, you're supposed to go individually to that person, but then if you're not able to resolve that conflict, then you go with one other person or go, bring someone else with you. And then if that doesn't resolve the conflict, then you go to the church. And I think for me, that really shows us that when something's not right, we don't just sit back and avoid the conversation, we're supposed to go and we're supposed to deal with these things. That doesn't mean we go and we, get violent or aggressive, but it means we go and have the hard conversations. And so, when we're going as a group, that's, the collective action of going and confronting someone who's doing an injustice like that is, that's part of our responsibility. And it isn't, sometimes some of those conflicts can be resolved individually, but oftentimes they can't, and you need to grab another person, or you need to get the church involved to help challenge the person and have those hard conversations.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense too. And Alexia, what would you add there?
Yeah, I mean, it's really fun I agree with you, Mickey, that everyone's voice is so interesting that I just want to talk. I want to listen for a long time, and then I have a million things to say. But I just want to add a couple right now. I keep thinking about the image of the body of Christ. And the body of Christ, I think, there's a couple of implications of thinking about the body of Christ that I just want to lift up at this moment. One of them is that if you're a member of the body of Christ, it's not a choice to be connected. You are connected. So in 1 Corinthians 12, it says, if one suffers, we all suffer. If one rejoices, we all rejoice. Like, this is not an option to suffer when your body can't choose whether or not to suffer when somebody steps on your foot. It does suffer. And if you don't feel your foot, the name of the disease when you don't feel your foot is leprosy. There's a reason why Jesus healed so many lepers, because the body, the community that is the body, often has leprosy. And you can't be fully alive if you're not fully conscious of your connections. I was thinking about that when Holly was talking about the choice to enter into someone else's suffering and share it, is that's really just a choice to be in reality. So that's part of what I was thinking about that I wanted to share. The other thing that I was thinking about is the way that Paul redefines the understanding of the community as body. That he doesn't, this comes from Jörg Rieger. I did not come up with this, but I've been riffing off of it for a long time because I think it's extremely useful. That the Romans came up with the understanding of the community. Their understanding of the community as a foot. You could never hope to be anything else, and a hand was always more important than a foot, and an ear was always more important than a hand. In that context, it's extremely powerful because he says the hand cannot say to the foot, I don't need you. The hand always will need the foot. And in fact, Paul even goes farther and he says the parts of the body that we would pay attention less parts need to happen as a body.
Okay. I think we may have lost Alexia right in the middle of that amazing sermon. No! Okay, deep breath. I'm going to try and compose myself because I'm really sad right now. Because that was amazing!
So smart.
Oh. Are you back? Is she back? I see a little picture. No. I think we just broke the internet with
over here. No, my connection's having.
Alexia? I don't know. I think we broke the internet. I'm so sad.
That's what I'm saying. You hear me?
Like, she keeps coming back a little bit. Okay, Scott, can you work on her connection, and then we'll come back to her, because I would like for her to start over. But so as she was, bringing the scripture and talking about all this stuff, what I really want to talk about is how do Christians get involved, or what does faith and a desire to follow Jesus, how does that impact how we coordinate and collaborate for justice? Like, how do we get that together? Jennifer, could you give us some insight on that?
Yeah. So I don't know how to be a follower of Christ and not get myself involved in this type of work, right? If we read the Gospels and look at the message that Jesus was preaching, right? He was some type of social revolutionary, breaking down and transcending barriers and boundaries. And so I think one of the things that sometimes we lose, particularly for those of us who are in the depths of the social justice kind of struggle, is the fact that we have the gospel on our side, right? I think far too often we cede the authority and strength and the moral and ethical fervor of the type of work that we each are doing to folks who would rather manipulate it for something else, right? So the Bible has over 2,000 scriptures about caring for the poor and for the marginalized, and not that many verses about some of the issues that we see dominating the headlines, right? So the biggest headline of religion over the past couple of weeks has been work around this religious freedom bill in Indiana, right? Which some of us might interpret as being exclusionary or hateful in some ways, right? And so part of, I think, our task and the task of folks who are Christians on the front lines of collective action and social transformation for the greater good is figuring out how to restake and reclaim our own authority as deeply rooted in the aspects of our tradition that are most prominent in the gospel.
Yeah. Telling a different narrative. And not that there have not always been Christians doing that. I mean, there have been socially active, parts of Christianity all along. But I see what you're saying. It feels like it has not always been the dominant narrative, and certainly not maybe within the last 100 to 50 years in the United States. And so, Judy, you've done faith-rooted organizing and have been trained by Alexia and worked with Alexia. So, what has that been like for you to kind of explain to people and work out your own understanding of how faith and following Jesus is related to collective action and social transformation?
Yeah, I mean, I think, I think it's like, it was interesting because I was an interfaith organizer for a while, and then I moved to Philadelphia and started work organizing, and I wasn't actually involved in a church for many years, and because I've had my my journey through the church, being raised in the evangelical church, and then having resentments towards the church, and then starting to work through that, and I feel actually right now I've been in this really healing process, going to Circle of Hope church that I'm going to now, because the one thing that's been really healing is the church is very interactive, and so we're very based on the cell groups that meet during the week, and they base a lot of the church around the small groups, and every week we have all these really beautiful discussions about how does our faith connect to our lives, and I feel like it would be so weird. I feel like there are some parts of the church where you sit and have these discussions, how does your faith connect to your life, but then you don't actually practice any of it. And if you don't practice it, then what's the point? Because for me, faith is not just it's not just something that's a belief is something that you do. You don't believe something and then do it, then you don't believe it. And so when I've worked within the religious community to organize, there are people who go to church every Sunday or go to synagogue or go to masjid, and then they have their that side of their life, and then the other side is the things that they do on a day-to-day basis at their job, or how they treat their employees, or how they treat their coworkers, or how they treat the people in their neighborhood. And part of faith-rooted organizing is reminding people. And when you do, I think it becomes obvious for people, but some people know, and some people just forget about that those things need to work together. And it's a really beautiful thing, because the reality is, workers that I work with, most of them are actually religious, and having their religious communities get involved means a lot to them, to show them that standing up for what they deserve is something that's backed up by their pastor or backed up by their faith communities. As I was organizing workers at the airport here in Philadelphia, a lot of the workers are immigrants from all over the world, and there was one store that I was working with, one food restaurant, that had a lot of workers from Ethiopia, and the workers were really scared to get involved in the union, and I didn't have any connections to them, and I found out through one of the workers that a lot of them go to this one church, and I went to visit the pastor of that church, and I said, I explained to him what was going on with the workers at their jobs, and it totally connected. He was like, yeah, like a lot of my members are struggling to support the families. They can't, they can't find jobs that pay them well. They get taken advantage of because they don't speak English well, or some of them don't speak it at all. And so he was able to he was invited me to come to the church and talk to this worker who is a leader in her shop and respected by all of her coworkers. Didn't speak a word of English, and he translated for me and talked to her, encouraged her why it was important for her to stand up for what she deserved, and having her pastor support her and encourage her gave her the strength and the courage that she needed, that like backbone support that she needed to feel to be able to then get involved in the union. And we won the union at her shop. And so I think that it's hand in hand, because the things that we're dealing with out in the world affect the people that go and sit in the pews every week.
Wow, yeah, that's really amazing. I mean, do you get that response usually from pastors or from congregations that they can just automatically, oh yeah, it would make sense that people need to have a job where they can feed their families, or do they sometimes not see that connection?
They're the ones that I've reached out to, a lot of them have. I think some of them, there has been some disconnect where people are like, well, I don't know if that's my role, and they're like, I've already got enough to do with the people in my congregation, because the reality is religious leaders have a lot on their plate. They're a lot like organizers working very long hours every week to be for the people in their community, and some of them just feel like, well, this is I've already got enough dealing with individual problems, and that's sad for me, because it's like if we keep just dealing with individual problems and don't deal with the systemic problems, then nothing's ever gonna get better. You have to make that connection, and so there are people who have had problems with that. But it's been surprising. Like when I was actually in Vancouver with the union, did clergy organizing, there hadn't been a lot of faith reader organizing happening in Vancouver, and especially connected to labor work. There wasn't a lot of unions hadn't really made that connection between working with the religious communities, and so it was just really cool, because I met with this imam from a masjid, I met with Catholic priests, and they were all like, wow, no one's ever come to us and talked to us about this before. Like, this is really amazing. Like, this, of course I'm going to do this. I worked with even a Sikh community, one of the Hindu temples, and it was just really cool to see people who are just kind of like waiting for, like, we're hungry for something like this. I'm really excited about it.
Yeah. Sometimes it's just because they haven't even been asked. So, yeah. All right. So, and Holly, what are your thoughts on following Jesus, or having, being involved in some kind of faith and participating in collective action, joining the two?
Sure. Well, having spent years in kind of secular organizing, broader movement organizing without so much faith, one of the things that I always felt was really a downfall for us, something that really felt wrong, was the kind of culture of anger and the culture that kind of called for the removal of the oppressor, like literally, like, let's just cut them out, or you might hear activists talking about, we could just round up all those people that are causing systemic oppression and just put them on an island and then nuke it. Then it would be great, we'd be all good. And as people of faith, and as I think Alexio was beautifully talking about, the body of Christ, that would be like blowing off a foot, how we have an innate framework and tradition and sacred scripture that tell us that we can't just cut out the oppressor. And that is, I think, a really helpful corrective to what we see in broader movements for change. And I'm not saying we have it all figured out, and I'm not saying this just a critique, but I have also seen in broader movements kind of a movement away from the kind of Saul Alinsky kind of model of one of the greatest tools that Saul Alinsky taught in community organizing was ridicule. That you could mobilize people by their anger, and then you could channel that anger into a great tide of ridicule toward the oppressor or the person in power, the system in power. And I tend to feel, and we've seen movements move away from that. I think that people get that anger is somewhat of a repellent. Anger does not invite people in necessarily. And one thing that I've been thinking a lot about is sorrow. That we should be speaking from sorrow, from the sadness. And I think that there are people groups that do lamentation so much better than I would say white culture is just kind of like clam it up and act like everything's fine. And I think that there's a great beauty to lamentation, to letting our sorrow speak to why things need to be different. So I think that we have something beautiful to bring to justice organizing because of our tradition. It's the tradition that gives us that framework of really around mutual liberation, that I'm not free until you're free, and you're not free until I'm free, because we're all in the body of Christ. And so the how process of how we go about organizing changes to something more inclusive, more accepting, and leads to transformation rather than more violence or continued violence, replacing one regime with the next.
So when, we've talked about a little bit about what collective action is, and even how it gets connected with our faith. But I do think, like you said, Holly, there is anger. Sometimes it's righteous anger. Sometimes it's there definitely for a reason. And I think even with sorrow or lamentation, people are uncomfortable with that. Our culture, American culture, is very uncomfortable with feelings. Unless it's just happiness. And so one thing that I've heard over the past 6 months or so during the Black Lives Matter movement and kind of the intersectional movement that's grown out of it has been Angry Orchard. Oh, yeah, girl. I saw that, Holly. But what I've seen out of the Black Lives Matter movement is people uncomfortable. Why do they have to do all that marching? Why are they out there every day? So what I want to talk about next is, how does collective action end up creating social transformation? Like, I think sometimes people don't understand why are you doing all these things? Why is there another petition? Why is there a march? Why do we have to go to the city council meeting and be confrontational? How do those actions and campaigns actually bring about the social transformation that we want? So let's start with Jennifer.
Yeah, so that's a great question. I think there are a number of ways, right? Collective action can help move people to a space of transformation. On the one hand, I think, to your point, Mickey, there's something really powerful about being made uncomfortable, right? When we're uncomfortable, it forces us to re-examine the status quo, re-examine the things that we took for granted, and re-examine the things that we assumed to be the norm. I'm thinking in particular about a lesson that I learned as a child, which is that part of part of growing up is as much about learning as it is about unlearning certain patterns of behavior and practices and beliefs. And I think there's something really powerful that collection of action can call our attention to and make us uncomfortable enough to recognize those things that we might need to unlearn as part of the process. I would be interested to hear what the rest of the group has to say, because it's a really rich question, right? There are multiple ways. I mean, from an organizer space, there's something really powerful about mobilizing 1,000 people in front of a congressman with a petition, right, to call them to task in that way. But I do think there's something deeper happening on a theological and spiritual level when we're, again, able to embody what it means to be the body of Christ out loud in space. That goes beyond that Alinsky type model of confrontation, right? And I think as people of faith, I'm not interested so much in the confrontation as I am in the personal relationship and transformation that can happen in that process of learning and unlearning and discomfort. So I'd be really excited to hear what my fellow panelists have to say as well on this question.
So Judy, could you tackle that next?
So it's like, do spiritual communities organizing create change?
Well, how does those actual collective actions, when you do these things, you organize in certain ways, how does that actually bring about the change that we're going for, the social change that we're going for?
I think, sorry, I'm like trying to process my thoughts. Yeah, I think, dude, for me, I feel like Jennifer was kind of touching on this, but I do like it does create change because when the masses, I think there's two things that speaks: money and numbers and mere people. Like when both those things are kind of what creates change in our society right now. And so when people, then the people that have the power to make decisions, see masses of people, that does, they do notice, and things do change. But I think that, to me, like, the important thing that happens with that is, because I always say, when I organize and we fight for wage increases or health care, that stuff's important, but the reality is winning a 50-cent raise often doesn't really transform a person's life. Or winning, a discount in their health care doesn't transform a person's life. It helps and it's important, but actually organize because what it does, it changes the person. More than anything, it helps people realize their value and their worth. And I think that's the more important thing in collective action, especially within a spiritual community, is people realizing what God wants us to realize is how precious we are to Him, and how precious we are in a community, and how much value that we have. And I think that's what so many people are missing in their lives. So many people are raised to feel like they have no voice, like they have no value, like they aren't loved. And organizing and spiritual community are like two things that can transform that for people and make them realize their own value, their own worth. And so when those two things are together, it's even more powerful to me. So.
Yeah, that is really good. That'll preach. That personal transformation that comes, because then they're ready to tackle the next thing and the next thing and the next thing when they really understand their individual value, and they probably also come to value the other people in their community more as well, which is really powerful. Holly, what would you add to that as far as how these actions lead to the actual transformation of our society?
Well, I love that question. It's such a rich question, because I think that we need to have a context of a greater strategy in which our actions matter. And this is important. So one person who talks a lot about this, writes extensively about this, an academic and an organizer, is George Lakey, and he has a 5-step framework for social radical social change. And he talks about social change happening in 5 steps, and he studied social uprisings, all over the world in the last 100 years. And so these steps are important, I think, in kind of understanding where a particular movement may be at, and then what's next, and how things actually get changed. So maybe I'll just briefly talk about the 5 steps, and maybe that'll give us some more context for where a social action may be nestled in this process. The first step is called cultural preparation. So it's where we begin to have a shared identity, a shared language. He says that people aren't willing to stick their necks out for other people unless they've developed a shared identity and they see themselves as connected to those other people. So that's when collective action really begins to, it's kind of tilling the soil, being able to prep for the action that is to come. And this is educational outreach work. It's leafleting, it might be guerrilla street theater, it's, all kinds of, it could be, someone standing on a soapbox on a street corner, it could be rallies and demonstrations. So we're prepping the culture for action. The second thing he talks about is building organizational strength. So this is where we see movements getting organized, connecting with each other, building coalitions, figuring out how to work. When the whirlwind of the moment approaches that reaches people wherever they are in the political spectrum to take action, it's because of the cultural preparation, and the organization is then in place to be able to act upon it, right? And then the third thing he talks about is propagation of the deed. So you can't just talk about what's wrong, you actually have to then get an action model out there. And that's the other thing I think about when I think about collective action. I think about models. I think about what are the concrete things that we can do. Is it a national convergence where we all come together? Is it coordinated actions that are disparate all over the country, but we do them on the same day? What is the actual action? And then very often in this 4th step, he talks about non-cooperation. So you find really tangible ways to not cooperate with the system, or within the system that's oppressing people. Like, for instance, there was a lot of different people groups protesting the Vietnam War, but it was really when the soldiers stopped going, and when the soldiers came home and participated in congressional hearings on Capitol Hill. There's a really great film about this called Sir, No Sir, and this is when the social cost of war became so high that it warranted non-participation by the very soldiers who were supposed to be out taking the war to Vietnam. So that level of non-participation is the thing that actually was the tipping point that really moved the needle. So that's a really important stage. And then stage 5 is actually creating alternative institutions. So we want to not just tear down, but replace the institution that's creating oppressive systems. But institutions are there because communities have instituted things that serve the community. And so the institution isn't like inherently evil. Back in the day, cops were called peace officers because they were initially there to help maintain peace in a community. And over time, the institutionalization of that role in society has brought in corruption and ultimately institutionalized racism and oppression and violence, right? So what's the alternative institution that keeps a community safe, that replaces the institution that's safeguarding racism and violence, right? So we've got communities, movements, and institutions The communities are the real deal. That's what we're trying to protect. That's who we're trying to serve, right? It's not about upholding an institution. It's not about just having a movement just to be rebels and be awesome, right? It's about serving a community and getting the community everything they need to be safe and sustainable, right? And to be thriving, and to have all of the rights that a community is entitled to. So it's really an ecosystem, the communities, institutions, and movements. And it's when the institutions are protecting something that's no longer serving the community that the movement is activated to then challenge that institution, to change it or replace it. And what I love about Transform is that we hang out with people who are already creating alternative institutions. We've got people who are like, just doing amazing frontline work, journeying with people who are deeply impacted on the front lines and in the trenches of, the oppression wars that we see in our culture. And so they're already creating those alternative institutions. So if we're connect those people with the strategic people who are trying to systemically take down the institution, we're working in two fronts at once. Where Joanna Macy talks about, she's an amazing writer who talks about social transformation. She talks about how you need holding actions to hold back oppression so that the alternative institutions have the safety in which to grow and evolve and be there and to strengthen so that they can replace the institution that's oppressive when it crumbles.
Yeah, that's really good. Thank you for that explanation of the 5 steps and all of that. So what do you make of, all of you, what do you make of this, what seems to be a surge in collective action, right? Is it really a surge? Is it, I'm sure there are many people that are like, we've been doing this for years and we've been fighting this fight, but I can say I don't remember even 5 years ago. I mean, today my Facebook feed had all this stuff about actions that were being done today for workers' rights with McDonald's, I think it was today. It was the increasing the wage to $15 an hour. And, there seems to be, action specifically where clergy will get together and participate in an action altogether. Where churches are getting involved in organizing, and so both in and outside of the church, there seems to be this surge of collective action at this very point in history. Is that what you guys are seeing? Do you think maybe it's just more media attention, a more connected world, or are we actually seeing something rising up within both the body of Christ and just in general? What would you say, Judy?
That's a good question. I was raised very conservative Republican and did not know about organizing. I started organizing when I was 19. I actually turned 30 today. Today's my birthday, so I'm milestone.
Happy birthday!
Thank you for spending your birthday with us. Holy cow.
I wouldn't have it any other way. So I think, I've been organizing for a little over 10 years now, and so I think, I actually, I don't feel like I have that breadth of a experience, in seeing. It's actually even being raised in a very conservative household. I recently watched this movie, She's Beautiful and She's Angry, about the feminist movement, and it was a lot of new information that I feel like I got involved in organizing from my personal experience and from my faith, and there's like a whole history, of movements that I don't know about. And actually, watching that movie, it was really cool because I saw tactics that women use of like banner drops, and they do these creative street dramas, and I was like, oh, that's stuff that we do today. And I don't know, like women were doing this in the 60s and the 70s to fight for women's rights. And so I do think, part of it, I do think this stuff has been happening for a long time, but that stuff gets hidden and pushed to the wayside, and they're not talked to. We're not told about all the organizing that's been happening, all the things that people have done to get us to where we are today. So I actually don't think like what's happening now is new. I actually think it's just that we don't always hear about the amazing things that people do, to fight for marginalized communities. So.
Oh, sorry, unmuted. I had to unmute myself. Perfect. Okay, so yes, I see what you're saying. It's been going on, but there is always, the story of history that gets told is not always the complete story. So, maybe there are things that we've lost or forgotten about or have been intentionally buried. What was the name of that movie again, you said?
She's Beautiful When She's Angry, the documentary. And Vivian Rothstein, who just retired from Los Angeles Alliance for a New Economy and also worked with Unite Here, was one of the people interviewed in the movie. So I know her, so which was really cool to see her on there. But there's a whole bunch of women from everyone from the African American women's liberation movement to the women involved in the queer movement, but all connected to the women's rights movement.
Wow. Okay. She's Beautiful When She's Angry. So that's a good documentary to check out. Do you know if it's available pretty much everywhere? Or do you have to?
Well, it's been doing a tour. It was only available for like a couple weeks in Philadelphia, but I think you can go to the website and look up, and they might be able to do a screening in your city, I believe.
Okay, great. That sounds really interesting. Holly, what do you have to give us about this?
Well, I think if Alexia were here, she would say, I know, it's so sad. We miss you, Alexia. We love you. I think that she would talk about the Kairos moment and this moment where there's a coalescing of outcry and uprising around particular issue or particular oppression that's happening. And I think that we're seeing that around police violence. I talked about this on an earlier open conversation about how when Idris Stelly was shot 32 times by San Francisco cops, in, when was that, 2001, 14 years ago, they wouldn't even release the names of the cops. We didn't even know who shot him. His family didn't even know who killed him. And we're in an age now where things are different. And I think that having a cell phone on every camera a camera on every cell phone is, one of those tools that's really helped both document oppression and also then popularize the experience of seeing someone get shot on camera, like someone real, like a real person got shot, and just the crazy circumstances where we see that violence unfolding in such an incredibly unjust manner by, people that our taxes pay for, basically, So I think that there's reasons that we're having a Kairos moment around that, but I mean, I think it's taken a long time, and I think that when you talk to veteran activists, you'll hear that kind of that sigh of like, man, we've been doing this forever, and it's really great to see the needle moving. I know there's a lot of hopelessness around that in a lot of communities, but it's really great to have kind of a longer term view on that, not just with myself, but in talking with veteran activists just about how much things really have changed. So, and I wish Alexia was here to talk about the Kairos moment because she does it so beautifully, but it's this idea of this upwelling, hits this tipping point, and there's no other option but for it to come forth, and so I do think the spirit is in that. And I also think, Mickey, that it's a little bit of when you've been researching cars and you decide the car you want, then you see it everywhere. It's like every car that drives by is that car that you're going to buy someday. I kind of feel like justice is that car for you.
There it is! There it is!
Yeah.
Awesome.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean, I tend to think that this is a moment in history. But moments in history aren't necessarily the first time that a moment like that has come around. But we are in another one of those moments. And there's not just one Kairos moment. We're in another one right now where where we've reached a tipping point and people have said no more. We must speak out. And where, again, collectively, enough people are saying no more. We must speak out. So I think that that's where we are. So I love I love personal stories. So I really want to ask you guys kind of what first motivated you to get involved with collective action, or just working towards social transformation? Like, was there a moment? Was there an issue? What was it, and what were those feelings, and what, or maybe a Bible verse if you're super holy. What was it that made you want to get involved in this kind of thing? Let's start with you, Holly. What was it that changed your life and made you get involved in social transformation?
I don't know. I had kind of a oppressive father, and I think my first words were, "That's not fair," but I grew up in a really beautiful place. I was total like white girl on a farm in rural Ohio, upbringing, and I guess the most informative earliest story was we had a really long driveway. I used to stand at the end of the driveway, and this immigrant farm worker would drop his daughter off on his way to work to stand with me and get on the bus with me. And she and I fell in love. We were just the best, just of friends. She was wonderful. I loved her to death. And one day, her dad brought her over randomly on a Saturday to ride ponies, because we had horses and on the farm. And my dad was in kind of a tirade that day and was making us clean stalls and was being kind of horrible. And he was really horrible to that man and sent him away and sent her away. And I actually never saw her again. He never dropped her off at the end of my driveway again. And I don't know. I think I was maybe 6 or 7 when that happened. So it was pretty young, and just an formative experience for me, where I was just like, you can't treat people like that, and that's just wrong. And so I don't know.
Wow.
The earliest thing I can remember. But I've been an activist since high school. So.
You've been an activist since you were 6.
That's not fair.
Your Barbies protested instead of making out with everyone like everybody else's Barbies did.
That's hilarious. A friend of mine just posted on my Facebook wall a cartoon about a kid who was like organizing her dolls into like a mass revolt. So yeah, that was me.
Yeah, exactly. Jennifer, I don't know if you heard the question, but basically I was asking about how you first got involved with collective action, or became interested in social transformation. What was it that first kind of pulled your heart toward that kind of work?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I think, if I'm honest with myself, it starts from a space of trauma that gave way to deep empathy for others. So kind of like Holly, I grew up in the Midwest, in rural west central Illinois, on the hump of the state of Illinois, and was one of the only people of color in my elementary school. My town that I grew up in, I was 95% white, 5% other. And when I say other, I mean all other, right? And I remember pretty distinctly in kindergarten being harassed and teased because I was brown. And I had to, being brown meant that I must be dirty. and that there was something wrong with me. And my mom tells this like heartbreaking story, which like if I ever have kids, I'm sure, I don't know how my parents dealt with it, of me like getting dropped off for kindergarten, saying, standing by the fence, my mom asking me, you know, why don't you go play with the other kids, Jennifer? And me saying, it's okay, they don't like me because I'm Black, I'll just stand here. And so I think that moment of trauma, that moment of othering, and that moment of being made to feel less than human because of something that I couldn't control, which in this case was my race, opened the door for me to recognize the suffering in other people who were made to feel less than human because of who they were, right? I think coming of age, particularly in a post 9/11 context, that was my entry point into interfaith work, and what would become interfaith organizing eventually was seeing other brown people getting attacked on the streets of spaces like my hometown and spaces like New York, just because of who they were and how they were practicing and living out their faith. And I think that gave way to being a child of the service learning movement, right? Thinking, you know, community service was the answer, right? If we could just like bring people of different backgrounds together to serve together, that would be the answer to all of our problems. And evolving in my thinking and becoming politicized, right? Understanding that direct service is one thing, but then there's this whole, and I mean, right, that's the church answer so often too, right? My youth group used to do Meals on Wheels and do all these really wonderful service projects that I think are really important, right? Especially when we're talking about meeting immediate needs. But understanding that that cycle didn't end and that there was something bigger at play, I think is what really started to politicize me in my adolescence and eventually into college, and eventually led me where I am now, which is really thinking about structural oppression and how to get faith communities on board with tackling the undergirding institutional issues that drive markers of inequality. So that's a little bit about my story.
That's great. I love it. Fantastic. So Judy, what was it, what was that thing that first drew you into this work?
Well, I have a similar story to Holly. That's one thing that connected us. I was raised with a father who had a lot of mental health issues and was very abusive. And my mother had immigrated to this country when she was 17 from Honduras. My mother's half Honduran, half El Salvadorian. And her mother was abusive towards her. My mother was abusive towards her, and so she raised in this cycle of abuse. And so when I was young, I'm the middle child. I have two sisters, and I was the one who always stood up to my father and challenged him, and took the brunt of his anger my whole childhood because of it. But that's where I kind of learned of this idea of like I deserve a voice. My father in his household, nobody could think or say anything that conflicted with anything that he believed or thought. And so, from especially when I was like 12 or younger, I was like, no, I have a right to think or say or believe what I want to believe. And so obviously my first organizing work was organizing my mother to leave my father. And so when right after I graduated from high school, I really pushed her like we have to leave this. This is not healthy. It's not. We're not going to survive if we stay in this situation longer. And so finally my mother got the courage to leave my father when I was about 18 years old. And I had went to this Christian college, this is a Pacific University, and I'm from LA, and it was mostly went to mostly Latino and Asian American high school, and then went to this Christian college where there was like maybe 10-20% students of color. So all of a sudden I realized, there's something different about me. But I was raised very Americanized, so I was like really confused. I had all these identity issues of like, I'm kind of white, but I'm not white, and what am I, And so and then I also we didn't have money growing up, but it was even worse when my parents split up. My mother was on Social Security, has a lot of health issues, and She's a lot better now. I think that actually being with my father created a lot of the health issues. And so I started working in food service, working on campus, making minimum wage, and just was very bitter and had a lot of anger. It's like, oh, you know, we're finally free from this abuse. And it definitely taught me that it's not, for me, it's not about money, because I was much more happier away from that abusive situation and completely poor than having a little more financial security, but being in an abusive situation. So that kind of shaped my values around organizing. It's about having emotional freedom and spiritual and intellectual freedom versus just about money or about, about physical things. And so I, had a lot of anger and resentment, was a very angry young college student, and I had a couple of people tell me that I should do this program called LA Term, where you live in LA with a host family and you do an internship. And so and a lot of people told me that CLUE, Clergy and Laity United for Economic Justice, would be an organization that I should hook up with, and maybe I should do my internship there. And so I was a sophomore in college, 19 years old, and I interviewed for Reverend Alexis Salvatierra, and I have my journal from back then, and I every once in a while I look back at my journal entry where I went home and I said, this has changed my life. I never knew that this was a thing. When you're in high school, you're not taught organizing as an option, as a career, and so this makes sense. Hearing about housekeepers who are dealing with physical injuries from dealing with their jobs, and I was like that. I dealt with a mother who was sick, all the time, and how hard that is to survive in society when you have a lot of health issues, and hearing how bosses can be verbally abusive towards their employees. I know what it's like to be verbally abused from my father, and hearing how it's like to struggle financially, and I was struggling, often couldn't feed myself, had periods where there was a couple days before I was getting paid and had no money for food, and so would steal food from the where I worked. I would get my free meal and then I'd steal an extra meal to go home. So if I did, I wouldn't eat. And so it just was this eye-opening experience. I said, this is what I want to do for the rest of my life, because I have felt so powerless for so long, and for the first time I see that there's actually, I don't have to be powerless and voiceless. There's something I can actually do with all my anger, and it changed my life, and I've been doing it ever since.
Wow, that is so transformative. You are the embodiment of contemplative activism. Love that. Nikki, I wanted to ask you to answer this question, because I would just love to hear, what it is that's moved you to this profound commitment to justice that you have in your life.
I knew you were going to do that. It's funny. I think it's happened in stages for me, because I wouldn't have called the work I did with women kind of before I moved kind of back into ministry and theology and church work. Before I really dove back into that, I was a doula and a childbirth educator and a lactation consultant, and trained other doulas and other people in lactation care. But we were one of the only. I did doula trainings with another woman, and we were one of the only doula training crews that actually included disparity issues, and and also information on different, kind of serving women that might be different from you, dealing with your own biases, that type of thing. And so I didn't really know that I was doing advocacy work, but I was. I didn't know that I was doing activism in that way. I mean, yeah, I might go to a protest about somebody's rights in birthing at a hospital or something, but even that I didn't, I would have never called it organizing or activism. And so for me, it was just this gradual. Some of that was, I think, having my children and making some choices that were different, and having to learn how to stand up for myself and for other mothers and families who, whether it was healthcare choices or how you were going to school. We were always the weird family, homeschooling and things like that. And so having to stand up for things like that and be okay being different, and joining with other families that are doing those different things. And and then even just having children who I have 3 children, a daughter and 2 sons, and I think for many of African American people my age who kind of grew up with, I call it the kind of the Cosby Show lifestyle. Like, my mother actually bought the paintings that are in the house in the Cosby Show, right? Like, we had those paintings. She still has them hanging in her house. And so we were really fed this, if you do the right things, you will get what you want in life. You'll avoid any problems with the cops. You'll avoid this. It will all work out as long as you follow the rules and as long as you're the most educated and the most well behaved And I almost think every generation has that. Like, I didn't understand what was going on during, the LA riots. I was too young to understand that. I was too young to understand the O.J. Simpson trial. But when Trayvon Martin died, when he was murdered, I understood. That was like my generation going, oh, wait, the Cosby Show didn't save us. And so that is when I could understand all these things I had done that were activism and organizing, it just kind of started to bring it all up to where I couldn't sit by and just, kind of have nice conversations about things, or I had to actually start doing something on a broader scale. And so I think there's both this gradual and these moments. And I think a lot of people are starting to have those moments where they say, no, now I can look back and see where an awakening was stirring. So that's my story. But I love telling these stories because I think other people will see this, will hear our stories, and will start to put things together in their own lives. And that's why I think storytelling is so powerful, because there is somebody who will identify with Jennifer's story. There is somebody who will identify with Judy's story. There's somebody that will see themselves in Holly's story. And there will be someone who will see themselves in my story. And while it won't be exactly the same, they understand why they are being pulled. They understand that they're not crazy, or even if they are crazy, that it's good crazy, and that they need to follow their heart and follow that pull. Because I really think it is that pull of that arc of justice, and it's pulling them to participate as well. So we do have to wrap it up because we are getting along in the evening. But just before we go, what I wanted to see if you guys could encourage people as they're listening to this and they're thinking about how they could get involved and really work towards social transformation where they live. What encouragement would you give to somebody who says, okay, I hear what you're saying. What do I do? What do I read? How do I get involved? Who do I contact? Like, how do people take that first step of actually getting involved, being part of that collective action where they live, where they're rooted? So, Judy, what would you say to that?
That's a really good question. I'm sorry. I think, there are campaigns. Sorry, my computer. There's issues happening everywhere in every city. People that are organizing. I think the beautiful thing about the internet is you can find any type of organization that you want just by Googling it. I think part of it is just kind of asking around in your neighborhood about the issues that are affecting the place where you live. If there are things that you care about, looking it up and trying to find an organization that's fighting around it. I just moved to in North Philly area, and my church is involved in this organization called Take Back Land, and that's one of the things that we participate in, because there's a lot of vacant properties that are that developers are trying to buy, and it's raising property taxes for people living there here, and so we're fighting for legislation around making sure if people are flipping properties that they're paying more taxes, and the empty lands, people are able to use them for community gardens and for communal space, and like stuff like that is, there's in every city there's generally campaigns around immigrant rights, around labor rights, and so just try to find an organization and call and have a one-on-one meeting with someone from the organization, have coffee, and say, I want to get involved. What do I do? I think what's the easiest way, if you haven't done it organized before, is try to plug into something that's already happening and not just start something, because you have to have some training and experience, because it's not easy just to start some if you just like, okay, I care about making sure the libraries don't get shut down in my neighborhood. But if you haven't organized before, it's harder than you think. I was talking to one of the workers I work with who's a leader in the restaurant, and she was saying, everyone has their opinion about how to organize. Oh, you should do this, you should do that. And she's like, you don't understand, I've tried everything. And so getting some experience working with an organization that is already on the ground, making things happen, is good. And then once you have that experience, you can take that to whatever it is that you care about.
Yeah, thank you. That's really good. Connecting with those organizations that are already doing something, that are already on the ground. Jennifer, what would you suggest to people who maybe have listened in tonight and they are ready to do something to get started in some way?
Yeah, I think to Judy's point, there are different entry points for this type of work, right? I would say one of the first steps, even before reaching out to a local organization, is giving yourself permission to ask questions, right? I think far too often folks find themselves paralyzed from moving forward because they're scared of the unknown. And so, I don't know, I always remember that scripture that my mom always says, right? God has not given us a spirit of fear, but of power and of love and of a sound mind, right? That there is something that has to happen internally first that moves us from a state of complacency into one of action. And so I guess my insight and advice, building on some of the brilliance that's already come before me, is give yourself permission to ask questions, to step out there on faith, and to be okay being wrong. Right? I think in any journey, giving ourselves the freedom to make mistakes along the way is a really important thing. So that would be my added insight to some of the more practical outreach pieces, is some of that internal work that needs to happen as well.
So asking questions of yourself, of what's happening around you, maybe even doing some of that internal questioning and work before you even jump out there and get involved. Is that what you're saying?
I think it's a both and, right? I think it's both making the efforts to do outreach, but also I think it's a two-pronged process, right? That there's internal work that sometimes happens, which is like giving yourself the permission to ask questions, to do that outreach, to step beyond our comfort zone. And then there's like the practical, let's figure out and use this really big brain we have called the internet to figure out what's out there. So I think it's a both and.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Holly, what would you encourage people to do as a first step, besides get in touch with Transform Network?
That's right, transformnetwork.org, baby. I would tell people to get trained, whether they do it through Transform or through Training for Change, which is Leakey's training organization, or maybe just a local issue training or teach-in on something that's going on in their community. I think having that kind of mental state of being willing to ask questions and learn, that Jennifer was saying, and to apply, your heart's passion, like Judy was saying, like really find something that calls to you. Be aware of our call. What is the Spirit telling us to do? What is the oppression that in the world that moves us to action? Because that's where we're going to find that fire that transmutes darkness or I don't want to say darkness, oppression into transformation, Yeah, so get trained. And for white people, anti-oppression training, if you really want to get into social movement work or even local community organizing, all white people need anti-racism training to do this work. So.
Yay. Which Holly does, and does beautifully, so,
Bring me to your church. I will train you.
And we will be doing all of that, offering that through Transform Network. Time for me to plug Transform. Okay, so I want to thank everyone for participating tonight. Holly, Jennifer, Judy, and Alexia, who had to leave us because their computer did something crazy. And thank you to Scott for all the work he did trying to get her back. We just weren't able to do that, but I'm sure we'll do another open conversation with Alexia soon. You can find archived conversations with Alexia on the Transform Network website as well. But thank you so much for being here with us tonight, both in YouTube land and to the panelists. Our next open conversation will be held May 6th. Tonight was Judy's birthday, but May 6th is my birthday. What? So, which I usually do a countdown, and I haven't done that this year, so just consider this your warning, everyone. You can send cards with gifts included. I'll take gift cards to the Transform Network address, right? Do we have an address on the website? Like, you can send me cards for my birthday.
We have a P.O. box.
Send it to the P.O. box, and it'll get to me. I'm like only, I don't know, 30% kidding. I love having birthdays. Like, you know how people are all embarrassed about like going to the restaurant and getting like the big sombrero and like the whole restaurant singing to them? I'm like, yes!
Got it. I love it.
I am not embarrassed at all. I don't want any cake or pie put in my face because you know what? I work on. Like this is a thing. So I don't want stuff on my face. But sing to me, the whole restaurant can serenade me. Like I am all clap. It's beautiful. So anyway, so Holly will be hosting that night because hopefully I will be somewhere partying for my birthday. But it will be the same time, same place on YouTube. The topic is going to be Sacred Wounds of the Walking Wounded. So it's going to be a good one. And we are, tonight will be available on the Transform Network website. It will also be on our Facebook page. We'll be posting it all over the place. So share it with your friends. We hope you'll be back for May 6th. And again, you can go to transformnetwork.org for updates for the recording of this. It should be on tonight. And share it with your friends, your pastors, your faith-rooted organizers in your life. And remember, our gathering, like we said, is next week in Washington, D.C. at Wesley Seminary, April 23rd through 25th. And all of our panelists from tonight will be there. It's going to be amazing. And you can still get tickets for $199. And you will be able to, until the day of, then it goes up to $249 at the door. So go ahead and get your tickets now. If you can get to D.C., get those tickets. Tell people you know that are in D.C. they want to be there. It's going to be amazing. We have a pre-conference session with Alexia. That's amazing. And we wrap it up also with Reverend William Barber. We also have Lisa Sharon Harper, Dr. Doug Poe, Reverend Joe Daniels, Adam Bucko, and it's going to be hosted by Scott and I, so it's going to be awesome.
Yeah, and Mickey, we have a $50 off code for people tonight. So if you want to buy a ticket for $199, you will get $50 off when you put in the code DC2015, and that will bring the price down to $149. We'd love to have you.
You can't beat that. I mean, you really can't beat it. And you know, when we talk about social transformation, one of the major well-deserved critiques of conferences in the Christian sphere is how white they are, how limited they are in what the topics are and who's talking, and the Transform National Gathering is really a place where we're really trying to develop that beloved community, where we are doing all that we can to make sure that the people who are speaking and leading workshops are actually people that are doing the work, and where you are actually getting, it's not, as I like to call, like white with some people of color sprinkled on top. We are not the sprinkles. Women and people of color are the main thing, the main course, not just the sprinkles. So come to the National Gathering. So go to transformnetwork.org. You can email us at info@transformnetwork.org. If you have any questions, we do have student rates. I think we're still looking for a few volunteers. So go there, be in touch with us, and thank you so much. Good night.
Thank you all. Good night.